opened the door, there was so much sunlight coming in.
I didn't know Billy Boy would be here.
She had a migraine. Migraine. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for June 7th, 2021 to order. Members of the board, what is your pleasure in regard to the agenda?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
I move we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting on June 7th, 2021 of the Wilson County Board of Education.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that the agenda for June 7th, 2021, Wilson County Board of Education be approved. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? I'm going to have to call a roll since I have someone absent tonight. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Borkin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. And before we proceed any further, please note that the meeting is being held face-to-face as well as remote due to the absence of Mrs. Boyette, who is joining the meeting remotely through Zoom video conferencing platform. All other board members are present in the boardroom. Mrs. Barnes, Mr. Borkin, Mr. Mercer, Mr. Breen, Mrs. Powell, and myself, Dr. Fitch. The meeting is being televised on Spectrum and Green Light Channel 22 and live streamed through the Wilson County Schools YouTube channel. The public can also view the meeting through links on the Wilson County Schools Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages and the Wilson County Schools website. So we thank each of you for joining us this evening, and we will ask Mr. Breen if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, to be followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you. I think that marks the end of the moment of silence. That took care of it, yeah.
Thank you so very much. Members of the board, you have in your packet the minutes of May 17th, 2021, a regular board meeting. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the May 17, 2021 regular meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the May 17th, 2021 minutes of the regular board meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Borkin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch. Aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Under the chairman's report, first of all, let me say welcome, welcome, welcome. It has been a long time since we have been face-to-face. I was hoping that tonight we would have all 7 members present, but it's not to be the case. But we are now back to reestablishing a new normal of face-to-face meetings. Our committees had a chance to meet today for the first time since the pandemic shut us down. So where we had changed our methodology due to the pandemic, we are coming back to what had been our regular normal. A reminder to the board and to our public that we will be having graduation this Saturday at our 3 traditional high schools. We have already had the graduations at WECA and Watt, and this is a day that everybody's been waiting for, because this year the graduation will not be drive-by. It will be in mass at each of the schools for our system. I'd like to offer congratulations to our Principal of the Year, Randy St. Clair of WECA, and to our Teacher of the Year, Karen Carlos of Watt. This recognition occurred, I think, since our last meeting, and it was a joyous event. I know Ms. Carlos is super happy because she gets the use of a new vehicle for a year. I would also like to recognize Mrs. Powell, who will be representing the board on a panel addressing the Wilson opioid crisis and its impact on June 17th through a Zoom call through one of our community partners, and I'm sure that she will represent us well. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank each of our teachers and faculty and staff at each of our schools as we have brought another school year to a close. We've had end-of-course tests. We have to await the results from the state. But we are now ready for summer and our Scholars Initiative, Summer Scholars Initiative, that will be talked about later in the board agenda. So we have a lot to be proud of, that we've made it through this pandemic and that we are off and running to the predecessor for our next academic year as we prepare for our Summer Scholars Institute and all the work that that will bring. So with that, I have concluded my remarks, and I will turn it over to the superintendent for his report.
Madam Chair and board members and audience members, I'll ditto some of the items from Dr. Fisher on my list, but we do want to recognize our Wilson County Schools Teacher of the Year and Principal of the Year from our May 20th surprise announcements. The Teacher of the Year from Watt, Karen Carlos, has been at Watt for 4 years, and she's a 17-year veteran. She was completely bewildered and was able to talk after a little bit on that day. I think the best part was her husband having the big head picture of her to put in the windows for her students and her children came home, was what he was looking forward to. So we're very excited for her. Mr. St. Clair obviously was caught off guard as well, and he has more than 16 years of experience, and he's been with us since 2017. But I also wanted to shout out Vestra Auto Group for providing Ms. Carlos the 1-year lease of a new Honda CR-V, and Brewmasters and Ruckus and Redemption for gifting her $1,000, and then also Wilson Education Partnership for helping us organize the prize and presenting them with cash prizes. The district provides some as well, but they'll now advance to the regional level on behalf of our school system, and we're very excited for them. It's nice to have the community partners be a part of that celebration, and it was a nice thing to get for the students to be there as part of it this year as well too. So I wanted to congratulate the 6 Fike High School students and the 2 Hunt High School students who were selected to attend the North Carolina Governor's School. If you're not familiar with it, that's a 5.5-week program, the summer residential program for intellectually gifted students, and this program integrates academic disciplines, arts and sciences, and unique courses, and the students are selected for their different courses based on their strengths in different areas. The students that I want to recognize, and if you see them, please congratulate them. This is a wonderful opportunity, are Lindsey Vaughn, Toby Snedeker, Sydney Mitchell, Isabel Twist, Derek Pitt, and Mary Watkins from Fike. And the students from Hunt are Rowan Bennett and Hannah McLaughlin. We're really proud of them and excited about this opportunity for them. Governor's School is a wonderful experience, and so they'll be representing us this summer. We just had awards day at our high schools, and that's one of my favorite days because I get to give out the Owen Scholarship. And this year we had 7 seniors who are going to pursue a degree in education. And my favorite part, and I tell them every year, is that once you do that, you have to come back to us for 4 years. So I really like to point that out. Most people don't get a big kick out of that as I do, but it's good to me. So that scholarship program, if you remember, began in 1998 with Pee Wee Murdo Owens creating a private trust prior to their passing, which is amazing for a school system to have that. And so I went back and had Amber look, and we have awarded 136 Owen scholarships, including this year's recipients. That is powerful for a school system. So that trust from Pee Wee Murdo Owens is really, really amazing. But this year's recipients are from Wilson Early College Academy, Caitlin Long and Jayla Whitby. From Bedingfield, Annie Green, Caitlin Drew, and Daisy Rodriguez. From Fike, Gabrielle Doherty. And from Hunt, here's a name you might have heard, James David Linden. We won't hold that against him. He did a really great job in the interview. But we're really excited about them coming back to us in 4 years after they've had a chance to go to school and be part of our family when they get done. So also we recognized, and you may have seen Dr. Kendra King, our new Executive Director of Student Services, in an earlier meeting. We're really glad to have her back. Her arrival was at a great time for our school system, as she'll be working with our nurses and counselors and social workers, as well as the gentleman's agreement and her pride as we get that back going. if you don't remember, she was an assistant principal with us years ago, and so we're very excited to have her come back. On the 26th of May, which seems like yesterday, and was kind of felt like yesterday considering how crazy things have been, we had a really special ceremony to celebrate the Distance Learning and Telemedicine grant. That was part of the USDA funding that we received. That grant was a total of $347,000, which will be used to place distance learning equipment in 6 of our rural elementary schools. Again, the emphasis there is on rural, so if people have questions about why certain schools, that's part of the conversation. Frederick Douglass, Gardners, Lee Woodard, Lucama, Rock Ridge, and Stansburg. That equipment's going to create a big leap towards us connecting with lots of different educational opportunities and connections for our teachers as well. It will also provide for interactive telemedicine equipment, and if we've seen anything this last year, we know that our student health centers and our connections with our medical community is important. And those 6 secondary schools that will have access to that equipment will be Beddingfield, Elm City, Forest Hills, Hunt, Spayton, Springfield. And again, that will be a part of our school-based health clinic, but also at those sites. So I wanted to thank Robert Kearns, who came down from the USDA and the entire USDA for their rural development funds and support. It was nice to have that celebration. We had so many people in attendance. I'm going to try and get them. Board of Ed members were there. Congressman G.K. Butterfield, Representative Linda Cooper Suggs, Betty Jo Shepherd represented Senator Richard Burr, Trey Lewis represented Senator Tom Tillis. We had the chair of the county commissioners, Rob Boyette, County Assistant Manager Ron Hunt, Denise O'Hare with the Healthcare Foundation, Teresa Ellen with the Health Department, Mayor Carlton Stevens, Ryan Simons with the Wilson Chamber, Paula Benson, Wilson Ford, and lots of other faces in there. But I think the important thing was and Drew was there as well. I give a shout out to Drew. He sent me some pictures today. I'd really like some Photoshop work done before you share those with anybody. The pandemic has affected my appetite. But it was so nice to see everybody in one location and celebrate that, and that was a really nice event. I also wanted to thank Rock Ridge Elementary School Principal Emily Chilton and her staff for hosting. That auditorium is a beautiful facility to go and visit at Rock Ridge, and so it was just a really good day, and it represents a lot of investment, not only for our county schools, but for the county and community in general. So excited to get going on that. It's that time of year when we're gearing up for our annual backpack drive, and like last year, we'll have backpacks available at the schools, and staff will make sure our students receive backpacks for those in need. Operation Backpack will now be in its 10th year. I know that Ms. Lynch is going to provide more information on our website and social media, but that is something, again, sets us apart from other places, and we've made some changes last year with the pandemic, and it worked out really well, so I think it's something we can replicate. I'll ditto what Dr. Fitch said about graduation ceremonies. Remember, they start at 9, and Linda has a list of details for your arrival and where to park and all the goodies of that event, and that is a wondrous day, and we're so excited to be able to see people and do that. One will be outside and 2 will be inside, Benefield being outside. And again, last but not least, congratulations to all of our students and staff and families for surviving through the last day of school, which was June 2nd, and we are so proud of all the work that went into managing all the chaos and changes this year and finishing strong. And we know that next year will be a return to school years as we know it in some form or fashion, but we're going to be back and ready to go. So I would encourage everyone to have a great summer and rest up. And I just really appreciate all the hard work and patience that folks showed this year at a time when it was really challenging. And I'd like to thank the board and others in the room today too, as a parent, as a administrator, for getting us through this year, because it has been a constant battle of change. So we're glad to see this one done, but we're also glad to start planning for the next one and going back to it. So, Madam Chair, that's my report.
All right, thank you. You know, it's the superintendent's report, it's the chair's report, but it's also the good news report.
It is good stuff.
We have missed having that physical presence of persons that we are recognizing, but the good news has continued to be shared. And so that is always the good thing, because good news doesn't often get shared. It's always the bad news that makes the headlines. No pun, Drew.
Come on, Drew.
But we just don't always toot our horn enough for the good news. So thank you so very much for all of that. Now is the time on our agenda for public input. And we have had public input through written communication throughout the pandemic, but today we have physical bodies, persons who are going to address the board. We remind the speakers that each person is granted 3 minutes for his or her presentation. This portion of the meeting is for the board to hear matters of interest from the public. However, obscene or vulgar statements, personal attacks, and statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or imminently threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. We're going to ask Ms. Hitch if she would keep time for us, and we have signed up. Flora, and if I mispronounce your name, I apologize ahead of time, but I'm going to try to get it correct. Flores Picasso and Maribel Herrera, who are speaking on supporting Latinx students and staff. Please.
Hi everyone, my name is Flores Picasso, and I was born and raised here in Wilson. I went to Bedingfield and graduated in 2009, and I went to NC State after that, and now I'm recently back in Wilson due to the pandemic. I was living in New York City, but I'm here to speak for the Latinx community, and I wanted to ask the board, what statement do you have for the Latinx students of Wilson that want to hear from their board members about what happened in Asheboro, North Carolina, and Ever Lopez getting denied his high school diploma?
We don't typically respond directly to you. We have either to ask the administration to respond to our speakers or the board chair, or you will, if there's an issue, we put it on our agenda at a future point in time. And that's the most that I can say at this point in regard to our policy and how it reads. But whatever has occurred in Asheboro or Asheville is that system, and we address the issues for our system.
I wanted to speak more about the Latinx students' experience and wanting to express themselves and have intentional and culturally relevant resources in their schools. And I had a conversation with the associate superintendent, and she recognizes that there is a need, but also expressed that there is a lack of resources, that being financial and human resources, to address the specific needs of the Latinx community. So I would like to ask the board, what can Wilson County Schools do for the Latinx community as far as providing intentional and culturally relevant resources?
Thank you. You'll not get an answer at this setting, but we will respond to you in writing, and it can be placed on agenda for future discussion.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So the other person that signed up was Maribel Herrera.
Hello, my name is Maribel Herrera. I graduated from Bedingfield in 2016. And my question is, can the board set up a district-wide forum in order to introduce the 25 Latinx teachers in the community, to the community? And then, can the board listen to their Latinx constituents at said forum and ask them what their needs are? And then my sister is a co-founder of the Latinx group Casa Azul, and they would love the opportunity to work together with Wilson County Schools and create a safe space for Latinx students to celebrate their identities and culture. And the question is that possible?
As I said to your sister, we will not respond in this forum, but we will respond to you, and I think some of your questions were also raised to the Associate Superintendent, and I believe some answers were given to you at that time. So, we will direct the administration to respond on behalf of the board, if that is your pleasure, or you can direct me to respond on behalf of the board. Refer the matter to a board committee, refer the matter to the administration, or place the matter of concern on the agenda for a future meeting. What is your pleasure?
I would like to see the administration respond, as well as thinking about a potential forum in the future.
All right, Dr. Mill, that's Mrs. Barnes. Is the rest of the board in agreement?
I agree to respond.
I agree.
On both points.
All right, Dr. Mills and administration, you are tasked to respond to the concerns that have been raised, and we will move that forward.
Be glad to do that.
Thank you so much. Now we're at our committee reports. Human Resource Services Committee. Mrs. Barnes, you have an item.
Okay. I think I can take this thing off for a minute. The Human Resource Services Committee met this afternoon at 2:30. Members present were Mr. Boykin, Mrs. Boyette, and also in attendance was the administrative staff or senior staff, Dr. Mills, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Parker, as well as board members Dr. Fitch and Mr. Mercer. And we only had one item, which was an action item, and that was to look at contracts that it was in excess of $90,000 and the approval of the superintendent. And at this time, the Human Resource Services Committee would like to recommend to the full board the approval of the AmTrust North America Workers' Compensation Contract in the amount of $161,347.
So is that a motion? You said
That was
it's
a
a
motion.
you said it's
And
a
a
recommendation. So is it also a motion?
A recommendation as well as motion.
All right.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Boykin, that we approve the AmTrust North America Workers' Compensation contract for $161,347 as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? And myself, Dr. Fitch. Aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Administrative Services. Mr. Mercer, you have an informational item for us.
Yes, ma'am. We met this afternoon at 3:30 and almost finished on time. We went into Dr. Fitch's time a little bit, but we have 5 action items, 1 information item. The information item was regarding transportation updates, which included, you'll find in your packet, a pay scale that different than the one we saw last time, which shows an increase in pay for bus drivers, which starts beginning bus drivers at $14 an hour and working its way up to $17 an hour. It also, in discussion, just a point of clarification, teachers that drive will be paid according to their years of experience of driving, not as their years of experience in education. Any questions or comments, discussion anybody would like to have regarding the pay scales?
Mr. Mercer, in giving that, it was not just the teachers who would get according to the years driving, but any of the drivers. Is that not correct?
Yes, correct.
All right.
I was separating them because we do have some teacher drivers, and since the scale is based on years of experience, it appears to be in 5-year increments by and large. And I just didn't want teachers to be under the wrong impression that if they had been teaching 20 years, they would be put on the scale of 20 years' experience as a driver. They will be paid according to the years of experience as a driver, is what I understood.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And we also mentioned that we were going to circle back around in about six months or so.
Yes. Since this is something that they've determined that, thank you, Mr. Boyd, that we're trying to make sure that we don't agree to do something that we're not certain we have the money for. It'll be assessed in 6 months or so, and if we can manage to pay more, then that'll be before the board to decide that. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Also, they shared with us that we got 2 more new activity buses, and we got 3, which means we have 5 new activity buses, and which when the school year begins, we'll be placing 1 at each of the traditional high schools, and 2 will be at the bus garage to be scheduled as needed. We also discussed that especially for trips further away, we want to make sure we have the buses that are certainly safe but also dependable, the most dependable, so that we won't have issues with them. Any other comments or questions about it? Okay, going to the action items. We had, the first action item is contracts requiring board approval. On that, we have PLT construction parking lot pavement at high school, $357,960. And they have the, it was a list of, in there,
Scope of work.
the scope of the work and the exclusions and so forth. Dr. Williams, you want to describe that project any further, or does anybody have questions? Well, hearing no questions, we'll go to the question. Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I move on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee that we approve the contract for PTL construction at Hunt High School's parking lot as recommended by administration.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we approve the PTL construction contract.
Can I just
PLT.
say that? Yes,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
That we approve the PLT construction contract for the paving of Hunt High School in the amount of $357,690. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Nay.
Mr. Mercer? Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Breen in opposition. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you. Our next action item, continuing budget resolution for 2021, 2022. Continuing budget resolution is to adopt an interim budget for purpose paying salaries and ordinary expense in the school system until the 2021-2022 budget is adopted. It just gives us a means of operating until the state approves the budget. Any questions or comments? Hearing,
Excuse
you have a question?
Did we address the CPL architecture?
That has been tabled, no, that is off the table
It's off the
today.
table. I didn't realize it was.
Thank you. Do we, hearing no questions or comments, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Administrative Service Committee, I move the full board approve the continuing budget resolution for 2021-2022 as recommended by administration.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we approve the continuing budget resolutions for 2021-2022 as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you. Our next action item is the 2021 budget amendments. The budget amendment 109, the state public school fund, it shows a budget increase of $6,051 due to March and April substitute pay in March and April technology interest, as well as adjustments for new teacher orientation. The funds were budgeted for salaries, benefits, equipment, and other things. There are also, it was also a transfer from support service to instructional programs to assist with the budget adjustments in relation to actual expenditures. Any questions or comments regarding Amendment 109? Okay, Budget Amendment 307, federal funds. Federal grant funds is a budget increase of $36,460,310, in which the ESSER 3 funds comprise 99.36% of the increase. Additional funds were received as well as IDEA 6B Pre-K, Title I and Title III competency-based assessment, McKinney, Bento, and 21st Century. Funds were budgeted for salaries, benefits, indirect costs, supplies, workshops, etc. There was also transfers from unbudgeted to instructional programs for additional supplies. Any comments, questions? Okay. Budget Amendment 808, Local Special Revenue Fund. A budget increase of $119,236.81, which is composed of proceeds from the auction, more at full, Medicaid fee for service and driver's ed fees. The revenues was budgeted for supplies, salaries, benefits, etc. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, Madam Chair, I move that the full board, and I move on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, that the full board approve Amendment 109, 307, and 808 as recommended by administration.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the board approve the 2020-2021 budget amendments, 109 from the State Public School Fund, 307 of federal funds, and 808 of local special revenue fund, as requested by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you, ma'am. Our next action item is the superintendent authorization to approve year-end budget amendments, which means up to the last minute, we're authorizing the superintendent to make amendments to the budget in order for it to balance properly, and of which actions will be reported back to the board. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move the full board approve the superintendent authorization to approve year-end budget amendments as recommended by administration.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that that the superintendent have the authorization to approve the year-end budget amendments as requested. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
Yes, ma'am. Our next and last action item, I think, is the Wilson County Schools and Wilson Medical Center Memorandum of Understanding, of which, if I understand it correctly, means athletic trainers will provide the services as it's been being provided for the athletic programs, but will be employed and paid for by Wilson Medical Center. Anybody have any questions or for particulars, I probably can get Dr. Williams or Dr. Mills to answer for you. But it appears to be a win-win deal. They get their name out there. They're seen as a supporter of education and community partner. And we get the expense of athletic trainers taken care of for us. Okay, any questions, comments? Hearing none, on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move the full board approve the memorandum of understanding between Wilson County Schools and Wilson Medical Center as recommended by administration with the mentioned change and pending review by legal counsel. Let me speak to the mentioned change, if I can. I'm trying to remember now.
Page 5,
Page 5.
Number 8.
number 8.
To the extent.
There you
To the full extent possible.
Well, go ahead and explain if you would.
I got it covered now.
Okay, to extent, okay.
Yeah, but they,
Yeah, that.
what we did.
What'd you say?
That's what he said.
Good job, team.
Yeah, that's right.
Quite honestly, does someone,
I have.
I'm happy to speak to it. My understanding from Brandon, who was working on that with you all, is that he made a suggested change in the MOU and that's been forwarded to legal counsel for the medical center, which I think is in Tennessee. And so we're just waiting for final approval of that one edit.
Number 8 on page 5, indemnification. Before it says each party, it's to the extent permitted by law. That's what you were looking for, Mr.
yes.
Yes.
I swear I heard that coming out of your mouth, I wasn't sure.
Well, it was, but I was using,
Yeah.
you got
Ryan heard
to
the same thing.
understand.
Ryan heard the same thing.
Yeah.
That's just for the record, to the extent permitted by law.
Yes, you made the motion, and then you...
And I referred to, with the mentioned,
Yes,
Legal
change,
yes,
and that was the mentioned change.
okay, and so I don't
Second.
believe...
And-
Okay, now I've heard a second. Okay. It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the memorandum of understanding between Wilson County Schools and Wilson Medical Center be approved with one addendum on page 5, section 8, adding the statement to the extent permitted by law. Each party in continuation with what is already there, and pending board council review. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
That concludes my report.
Thank you so very much. Next on the agenda is a committee report from Instructional Services. We had a very interesting presentation from Dr. Wilson in regard to the Summer Scholars Institute, which was one of our three informational items. I'm sorry, one of our many informational items. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Wilson for her report. Summer Scholars Institute is basically going to be our summer school that has been mandated by the legislature. And so our plans for the Summer Scholars Institute is what Dr. Wilson is going to present. And some of you as board members were not able to be in attendance for the committee meeting, and I think that this would answer questions that some of our public may have. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wilson for her to make her presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the board, you have a presentation in front of you, and it's also shown on the screen. So if you have any questions in the middle, just ask me, but there's also time at the end as well. So on slide 2, talks a little bit about the Summer Scholars update and where we have been in instructional services along this road. I joked with the instructional services team that it needed to be an interstate more than it needed to be a 2-lane road. And you see all the different little road signs that we've had, and then we still have some work ahead to do. And then the next slide, you will see some information about summer scholars by the numbers. We are required by legislation 150 instructional hours. And we have selected 10 school sites. There'll be some information along the presentation as to why we selected 10 school sites. And within those 150 hours, we have 24 school days. We have 1,881 students registered. We are serving 1,755 students. We have a total of 195 teachers, 74 assistants. Out of those students who are expected, we have 670 of those are priority 1 students. And they are students who are in the Exceptional Children's Program. They have a 504. They have been identified English language learners. They are 3rd grade students who did not meet proficiency, and 2nd and 1st grade students. And then that left 1,085 students where the schools got to pick who their priority 2 students would be based on the proficiency level of those students, whether it's their report card grades, maybe end of grade scores, those kind of things. We have 3 different levels here on page 4. The elementary and the middle school are very similar, the K-8 and how it's going to be, but there are some differences, so we did separate them. And then, of course, the high school is very different with the credit recovery. The schedule will look the same at all 3 levels on slide 5. You will see that information no matter whether you're at the elementary, middle, or high. The hours are 8 to 3:15 for students, and the staff will be 7:30 to 3:45. We do have 2 cohorts. The cohorts are divided up more for the staffing because we certainly encourage all of our students to be there the entire 6 weeks. And it starts June 14th, so that'll be next Monday. We provided on the next slide a sample of schedules that we have for the elementary, the middle, and the high school. At the district level, we created these, the team did, and then shared that out with the principals and assistant principals so that they could help their teachers create the schedules at their respective schools. Regarding instruction, we do have at the K-8 level you will see it listed as the core areas, the language arts, the math, science, social studies. We also have the social emotional, which is required, and then we have enhancements that's required by legislation. The instruction at the K-8 level is more of project-based learning or problem-based learning, and then we have the assessments that our students are taking, whereas at the high school level, you'll see that, again, that's credit recovery. And then in the 9-12, we have the high school requirements. There are a total of 15 different courses that our students could take. And again, according to legislation, we have to offer social and emotional learning and elective for our high schoolers, which is a little bit different than what we've done in the past when we talk about credit recovery. We've listed information regarding the materials and resources that we're providing. The first bullet is the standard general classroom type information. And then the last 4 bullets under that is American Reading Company is for K-5, and then the novels would be more for the English language arts for the 6-8, and then Dreambox is for math, K-5, and then the STEM inquiry-based consumables. So we're providing those resources. So teachers don't have to pull items straight from their classrooms into our summer learning expectation. And in regarding operations, Dr. Williams and his team have worked with the safety. It will be expected to follow the protocols, whatever the CDC hands down to us and our local health department, and Dr. Williams and his team will work on that. We do have fire drills that will happen in our schools that have students assigned to them, and Dr. Williams has lined up with our SROs to be at the middle and the high schools, and then they will be rotating at the elementary sites.
Is he one of our students? He is adorable.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Miss Lynch gave me a Google Drive with all the pictures so that I could use them in different presentations. And so I was looking for a picture in here because I had to choose a child, and I was like, gotta pick him. Isn't he though? And they'll have.
Part of a new SR program at the elementary school.
I'm just so excited that he was on there. I thought I hit the jackpot with him. He's at Hunt. He was at the Hunt preschool.
He's at preschool.
Then we do have breakfast and lunch being served. I think that will be one of the easier things that we've done because we've done that a lot in the past. I mean, we've been doing that, so that's nothing new. Transportation. Mr. Harvey and his team have that all lined up, and parents have been providing the information as they're going to be carpooling or on the bus. Our cleaning schedules will continue to happen at the schools, as well as just remember that there are maintenance projects that are going on at the school levels, which is the reason why those 10 sites were selected. Because if something major is happening at a school, then you can't have students in that school during that time. So then on the next slide, we have the elementary sites as listed as the administrators. In the bold print in that first column would be the host site, and then the names of the schools following that would be the schools that would be combined with them. In cohort 1, we have all assistant principals helping as site administrators, and then in cohort 2, you see the list of assistant principals who have signed up to be site administrators. We are also giving some people some additional experience, like Miss Wester. She's assigned to Frederick Douglass, and she's a middle school assistant principal, so she's getting some additional experience at the elementary level. At the secondary level, we have 2 middle schools used, and the 4 middle schools will feed into those 2. And then we have 1 high school that will be used, and again, partly is because of the maintenance projects that are going on. And you'll notice in cohort 2, we have Miss Looper, who is retired. She will be coming back and serve as site coordinator, and we have 2 district staff who will help because Miss Looper's time frame is part-time. So we need we need some additional support there.
They're also working on their administrative degree.
They are, that's exactly right. They have graduated from Barton recently, and look forward to having some of that opportunity experience. Slide 11 gives us information about the elementary students and the number of expected students at each site. I've given you the number of priority 1. That would be, again, that EC, EL, 504, grade 3, first grade and second grade. And then based on staffing, and this is where the staffing part comes in. So based on the staffing at Vic, for example, we know that we can serve 76 priority 1 students. All of our priority 1 students got into the summer scholars. Every one of our priority 1 students, if you hear that didn't happen, then please let us know, because the priority 1 students that registered are in, based on that 1,881. And then with the number left over from our staff, then we were able to fit in 89 students at Vic, or, for example, 72 at Rock Ridge. So that's how that number came to be. The same happened on slide 12 with the secondary students. The important information on slide 12 is that you see the number like huge at Beddingfield with 375. That's because at the high school level, they're in cohort 1 and cohort 2. So you may not necessarily have the same students for those 3 weeks at Beddingfield as in cohort 1 as what you would have in cohort 2. Whereas again, at the other K-8 level, you should see the consecutive. Now that may not happen, and if that does not happen, we do have a wait list for our students. Slide 13 talks about the certified incentives. The first 2 incentives that you see on this list are from the district. We decided as a district that $1,500 would be to the staff who will complete the 150 hours of instruction. And then if they are unable to work over the whole 6 weeks period or the whole 150 hours, then we would have $500 for the teacher or the staff, the certified staff for the first cohort or the second cohort. The last 2 incentives that you see are from the state. They are outlined in the legislation. $1,200 bonus, as if they had had a bonus in the past. Because we didn't have the EOGs and the EOCs in 2020, but any teacher who taught any of those grade levels that are listed there that received a bonus in the past, they would get an additional $1,200 to work during summer scholars. Or, and it's an or, not an and, or if they have their national boards. And then the $150 is for 3rd grade teachers. Teachers who sign up as the teachers of record for 3rd grade would receive $150 that if they're able to move a non-proficient student to proficiency. The next slide talks about the classified incentives. And again, that is about, both of these incentives are district. You'll notice that there are no 2 other information's numbers at the bottom of that because the state legislation did not require that. But we in Wilson County Schools felt like that our classified staff needed to have this benefit as well. So it's $750 for the 150 hours and then $250 for either cohort 1 or cohort 2. This is a little bit of information about the contracts and the pay schedule because we want everyone to know that there is a contract that's coming. Dr. Parker and his team have been very furious in getting our temporary contracts together, and they will be signed on June 9th. June 9th and June 10th will be what we would call work days, and there's a lot that's going to be happening on those work days. One would be signing of the contract. Another you see listed under June, certified staff will learn how to fill out a hard copy timesheet. And then just any kind of logistical information that needs to happen, as well as learning about their schedule, getting their rooms ready, that kind of thing. In July, we will be able to do the timekeeper, the electronic sign-on. And then in August is when the payments will come out. Now, the teachers will get paid, and any of the staff in summer scholars, the 10 and 11 month staff, they will get paid their hourly rate of pay at the end of each month. So that at the end of June, they'll get their hourly rate of pay. At the end of July, they'll get their hourly rate of pay. No stipends will be paid until all of summer scholars is complete and over with. Because we want to make sure, as we are working feverishly about getting this done, that we don't hand someone out $1,200 by mistake and then say, oops, we need to make sure this is correct. So you'll notice the August is where there'll be the payday for the July the 19th through 29th with the stipend payments. I did put an asterisk at the bottom to where teachers who are eligible for the third grade bonus, they will not receive that $150 per student until it is verified at the state level. And that could be as late as possibly January. So if people think that they are going to get that part quickly, we do have to verify those scores for that. So the reporting requirements on slide 16, legislation provides the first 5 bullets, what we need to report. And the last bullet is something that we learned in a technical webinar on Friday. The team met to find out about what our attendance requirements are. And so teachers will be taking attendance, and we will need to share that at DPI. You will see in the first 2 bullets the information about the assessments. I forgot to mention that when we were having our committee report earlier today, but that lists the type of assessments that are going to be had between kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade, and it spells it all out. And again, the reason 9 through 12 is not listed there is because they are part of credit recovery. And slide 17 talks about our tentative dates. One of the barriers that we've heard from our staff is that this was late knowing, but let's remember that we only learned about legislation late March. I mean, that's when we knew that we were possibly going back with Read to Achieve, and we've done Read to Achieve for several years. But Summer Scholars is Read to Achieve on steroids.
Mm-hmm. It's like April 9th or something they adopted that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was rather late when it was finally ratified. And so because we know that's a barrier, and we know that that might allow us, if we can go ahead and get the dates out, that might help people as they make their vacation plans for next year to know that this is what our dates will be. And then these are the references that we use. That last, just so you know, it's on our district website for Wilson County Schools, as well as the session laws. And the first one on House Bill 82 is the Summer's Learning, and Senate Bill 387 is the Read to Achieve. So we had to mesh those together. Any questions?
Members of the board, that's an awful lot of information, but I wanted to make sure that Dr. Wilson did this not just in committee, but here in board meetings, so that the public could see the ins and the outs and the timelines and the requirements and everything, which is why she took the time to go through that entire presentation rather than just giving us a summary tonight. Any questions?
I have a comment.
All right.
Dr. Wilson, Dr. Parker, just like to thank y'all for everything that y'all put into this. I mean, this was a monumental undertaking in a very short period of time, and I think that it looks very well put together.
Thank you. It was definitely a team effort. Everybody has helped to get it together.
And thank you for doing that. Now, we had conveyed that to Dr. Wilson, Dr. Parker, and team in committee meeting, but for that, this public acknowledgement at this point, because it was an awful lot of work in short time. So thank you for pointing that out. Also, under information, is contract requiring board notification. And you have in your packet the company of Panorama for the amount of $39,795. And they are dealing with providing service for socio-emotional learning platform and the support license. And in your board packet was information in regard to the Panorama contract and the information so that you have a better sense. If you have any particular questions in regard to Panorama at this time, we will allow you to raise those questions or comments. Hearing none, we'll move on to revised policy 1510/4200/7270, school safety as a first read. Dr. Mills, Dr. Wilson, any comment, or members of the board, do you have any questions? And do you want to go through each one of these, or just take them as a group as first read tonight? What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
being a second reading, if there's not
No,
question,
these are first reads, sir.
excuse me, being a first reading and being available to us, I have no questions about them, and I wouldn't be opposed to approving them or accepting them as first reading as a group.
All right.
Dr.
Yeah. Yes.
The ones that you see in the first reading, as well as all of our policies, but particularly these in the first reading, they are coming strictly from the School Board Association and
Okay.
their recommendations,
All
and
right.
they have been reviewed by the board.
All right. You've heard the comment made by Dr. Wilson that these are coming at the recommendation of the North Carolina School Boards Association. They have been cleared by board attorney, so they are not necessary for review, but according to our policy. And these are not issues that are time sensitive, so they are on a first read basis. But if you have any questions in regard to these policies, please let us know. So that's revised policy 1510/4200-7070, school safety. Policy 1610/7800, professional and staff development. 2440, policy review and evaluation. Policy 3620, extracurricular activities and student organizations. And policy 4040-7310, staff-student relations. These are all revisions. I think we had looked at these all as we were reviewing and revising our policy manual, but it was noted that policy revisions would come from time to time as needed, as legislation or as needed, so that we would not find ourselves again having to look at the entire policy manual being gone through meeting after meeting after meeting, but that they would be added to our various agendas. So, given that,
That's obviously a problem.
we will accept these as a first read so that they will come to us in future. So that, moving now to the action items, we have a contract requiring board approval regarding instructional services. The contract is for Instructure for the amount of $128,889. Service being provided is case benchmark assessments, in-case platform, and item bank. And this is the testing program that we use. It has been used by us in the past. It is a different name because Case Benchmark has merged with, I guess, Instructure, so that it is coming to us now. It does exceed our $90,000 threshold, and so would require board approval. And I think this has already been reviewed by legal counsel. So what is your, first of all, do you have any questions in regard to this contract? Hearing none, what is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve board policy 6420, contracts with the board with the Instructure case benchmarks in the amount of $128,889 as recommended by administration.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that we approve the contract for Instructure for $128,889 as recommended by the administration. And as stated, it has already received clearance through board counsel. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch? Aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda is revised policy 2610, board attorney. This is a second read policy. I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, I need to turn this over to you for these action items. We've already carried the contract requiring board approval, but I'm going to turn the meeting over to you now for
Okay.
the remainder of these action items. I apologize, and legal counsel, board attorney, if I am out of order as to having carried that motion. I will turn it over to Mr. Mercer for his carrying of that motion that we just had, since I was not in order in having done that.
If you would like to redo that, just to make sure that the procedure is proper there, Dr. Fitch, that's fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Mercer, the meeting is now in your hands.
Yes, ma'am.
And as such, on the recommendation of the Instructional Services Committee, we recommend and move that the contract requiring board approval for Instructure for $128,889 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the full board approve the contract with Instructure for the amount of $128,889 be approved as recommended by administration. Any further comment or discussion? Hearing none, please vote when called. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Mr. Boykin,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Dr. Fitch,
Aye.
and I vote aye. It carries unanimously.
Thank you. The second action item is, as a second read, the revised policy 2610 board attorney. Members of the board, after discussion in committee, it is the recommendation from the board that we look at lines 19 and then line 25, 26. In line 19, we strike the word normally so that it reads the board chair will decide for board members when to seek legal advice or assistance on school matters. It then moves down to line 25, 26, 27, 28. On line, starting at line 25 with this sentence, the chairperson of a board committee may consult with the board attorney on issues that arise out of and in connection with the committee's work. The inquiry and response will be reported to all board members. It is the recommendation of the committee that those two sentences be stricken so that line 25 would end. Attorney's replies will be reported to all board members and the superintendent. With that recommendation made, Mr. Chair, on behalf of the Instructional Services Committee, I move that the revision of policy 2610, board attorney, reflect the strikeouts that were recommended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Mr. Vice Chair, before we call the question, I'd like for there to be a little bit of discussion regarding this policy before it's adopted as a second read.
Well, I think this is not to adopt it as a second read.
Well,
This
to
is-
adopt the policy.
No, it's not to adopt the policy. The motion, as I heard it, was for the full board to approve those changes, is what I.
So the changes only.
Yes.
That's what
the motion was.
That's what the motion was, as I understood. 'Cause, I mean, I understand there's gonna be some discussion.
Yeah.
But so does that take care of the
That's
moment?
At the moment, that takes
Yes,
care of it.
okay. It's been moved and properly seconded that the policy, on line 19, strike the word normally, and also on line 25, in this section with the word superintendent, and strike the remainder, starting with the chairperson of the board committee and so forth. Any further question or comment about these changes? Hearing none, please vote when called. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette?
Nay.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
As to those changes, aye.
Well, that's what the motion was. Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And myself, aye. It is approved 6-1. Dissenting vote being Ms. Boyette. Now,
Mr. Mercer.
Yes, ma'am.
In regard to the second read for this policy, it is the recommendation of the committee that the revised policy 2610 regarding board attorney with the stated strikeouts approve on second read the revision of the policy. Therefore, I move that we approve on second read the revision of policy 2610, board attorney.
Second.
it's been moved and properly seconded that we approve policy 2610, board attorney, as a second read. Any discussion?
Yes, absolutely. If we could just take one and pass, that would be great. So I decided to dig into this policy Per our precies, the policy is being revised to comply with the general statutes and align with the North Carolina School Board policy. So I pulled the general statutes. 15A-544.5 is in the Criminal Procedure Act. That's the bond forfeiture statute. 544.6 is final judgment of forfeiture. 544.7 is docketing and enforcing final judgment of civil judgment. 544.8 is relief of final judgment of forfeiture, and 115C-36 is the one that makes us exist. In regards to the North Carolina School Board policies, I can't independently verify what the North Carolina School Board suggests. It was my understanding that while we were doing this initially, the purposes of revising these policies was to essentially update the numbers and not necessarily update the policies with complete uniformity to whatever the North Carolina School Board Association was proposing. While I was digging into this, the North Carolina School Board will send out these same policies for $3,500 a year and will kindly update them for us for $2,500 a year. During my deep dive, and very thankfully, with the uniformity of numbers, finding School Board Policy 2610 in the 100 plus LEAs in North Carolina was very easy to find. There are two currently that are actually, one reviewed their policy March of 2021. That's Stokes County, that's attached. That's the third page. If you take a look at that. Sorry, that's the fourth page on mine, but it's labeled Stokes County School Board. There's no mention of increasing their term to 4 years. And then Cherokee County, who is currently reviewing their policy, again, no mention of an increase to 4-year terms. And then the next thing I looked at, so per our precies, there's no justification that would require us to alter our policy, or no justification or reason why we should engage in this action anyway. The second thing I looked at was the cost. Looking at our yearly breakdown, 2017 to 2018, we spent $435,727.50. 2018 to 2019, $354,000, $379.75. 2019, we were back up to $455,512.60. 2021, we're still accruing those legal fees. I'm not sure what we are. And then our budgeted amount for 2021, 2022 jumps to $695,000. Now, how exactly does that compare us to other districts? So I looked at the 5 largest school districts in the state. Wake County Schools has 161,907 students, 19,000 employees, 191 schools. Their budgeted amount is $1.3 million and some change. Charlotte-Mecklenburg has 148,299 students. I couldn't get a hard number on the number of employees, but they have in excess of 19,000. They have 179 schools. They have in-house general counsel. They pay Miss Mays $229,500. Guilford County, I couldn't find any data for Guilford County. Their website is wrapped up tighter than a tick. So I looked at Winston-Salem Forsyth, which was next down. They've got 52,000 students. They have in excess of 7,400 employees. They have 78 schools. They pay their in-house counsel $122,333.40. Cumberland County, which is the next largest, they have 50,000 students. They have 6,800 employees, 85 schools, and they pay Nick Socha $166,046. Looking at the schools around us, the data that I could find, I couldn't find anything on Nash County, but Johnston County, 37,000 students, 5,000 employees, roughly 45 schools. I'm not sure who their legal counsel is. The last thing I could find was that because they were looking for alternative legal counsel, their in-house counsel resigned. But their legal fees that were budgeted for 2019, $360,000. Edgecombe County, they have 6,200 students, approximately 700-ish employees, 15 schools. They've got Tharrington Smith as their attorneys. Their entire budget, so looking at our school board budget and what Mr. Stanley presented to us during our budget meeting was what our entire Board of Education budget was. And that came in right around, I want to say $800,000, maybe $750,000 total. I don't have that number in front of me. But their entire budget for their Board of Education is $220,000. Or sorry, $220,000.
Does that include council?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
That's their entire budget for their Board of Education expenditures. And then we turn to Wilson County with 10,500 students, 1,726 employees, 26 schools, and we budgeted $695,000. We are 1/16 the size of Wake County, and we are budgeting to spend half of what Wake County Schools is going to pay for council in the coming year. We cannot and should not bind ourselves to a 4-year contract. I would implore you to vote against this policy so that we can reconsider the contract that was approved pending approval of this policy. I think now even more, since I've done this deep dive into what everybody is spending around us, especially cost per pupil, I think it's incumbent upon us as stewards of the money we receive from the taxpayers to keep the yearly limit as a 1-year limit, and at the appropriate time, put out requests for proposals, because we put out requests for proposals for everything. We even put out requests for proposals for milk. We saw those contracts come back. We put out requests for proposals for grading. The only thing we haven't put out, and one of the largest expenditures that we have per year, is for our legal services. And I think it is necessary that we not approve or not pass the policy that would allow up to a 4-year contract, so that we have an opportunity to evaluate outside counsel and see what, if anything, else is out there.
I have a question for legal counsel. We just approved a revision of the policy and changed the language somewhat. Would that put us back at a first read, or would that keep us at a second read?
You can keep that at a second read. There's an acknowledgement. That's why you have 2 readings. You might make some minor edits between reading 1 and reading 2.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm in agreement with Mr. Breen. Yeah, I sat down off the work that he's done and put some numbers together. Yeah, it looks like Wake County is paying $8.49 per student annually. Looks like Johnson County is paying $9.72 per student annually on legal fees. Wilson, from what I'm looking at, is, we're looking at paying or proposing paying $57.52 per student annually. I mean, that's a big difference. And yeah, I think that we really need to sit down and look at what we're doing as far as legal services are concerned. And I'm also very reluctant to do anything on a 4-year term. Because, I mean, this board is going to change in the future, as all things do. And I view a 4-year term as handcuffing any future board that may come into play. So if we decide to do this today, if it changes 15 months from now, then they have to deal with the changes that we've put in place today. So yeah, I'm against it.
I'm trying to follow you. Mr. Breen, are you suggesting then that we table this reading or change the wording from 4 years to 1 year? I'm not quite following
I think
what you're asking.
my ask is I have no objection to the changing and the adoption of the language in lines 19 and 25 through 26, taking those out. What I specifically object to is increasing our board contract limit from 1 year to 4 years.
If you object to a 4-year, then what is your alternate?
I think we go back to the 1 year and put out that RFP. I mean, that's what we've been doing since I've been on the board. It's my understanding that we had 1-year contracts since, what was it, 1998 when we adopted the school board policy. That may be wrong.
I'm not
guessing.
sure that our previous policy had even addressed a number of years. I think when we redid, it went to 1 year, but I think prior, there was no language as to 1 year, 4-year, or anything. And I think when it went to 1 year, there was just the ask that it be changed, the consideration, primarily because we have looked at other contracts that are multiples. We certainly don't change our banking contract every year, because by the time you get geared up and all your printing and whatever. So our banking contracts and some of the others, I think we have done multiple years for our accounting firm. And so this was the first time that for legal services it was at a multiple year, because the previous policy was silent on term of contract.
Well, I think the one we adopted, April 20th of 2020, suits us just fine.
That's the one for 1 year.
That's the one for 1 year.
Let me go to line 7, I guess through 12, Mr. or Mrs. Chair, whichever one is carrying the meeting, and it said that the chair and superintendent shall conduct an evaluation annually of the board attorney's performance, seeking input from all board members and from the relevant staff members who have worked with the board attorney. The board attorney will be evaluated based on responsiveness, accessibility, experience, knowledge of school law, knowledge of the Wilson County Schools, proactive communication and judgment. A written evaluation will be shared with all board members and the board attorney. Is that being done presently, or is this added language?
This is added language.
Added language.
It's in red, it's added.
So if it's added, does that mean that from this point on, if we were to approve a 4-year contract each year, the firm of our choice will be evaluated as far as its effectiveness, and then is a decision made then to retain them, not retain them? Just asking questions.
I think, Ms. Barnes, if I hear you correctly, your question is regarding the evaluation. It is something new, and does it have consequences if it's not a positive or acceptable?
That is what I'm asking.
It certainly would be, in my opinion, would be implied, but it's not written in there that I've read.
Well, if you're contractually obligated for 4 years, then if we weren't happy with the services, I mean, we'd kind of be in trouble, wouldn't we?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, we can't
That's what
hire
I'm
our
saying.
attorney
It
to
would
get
be-
out of it.
There's no need to have an evaluation if it doesn't have consequences. And there's no consequences mentioned in there, but I feel differently about the 1 year, because there's so many issues we deal with that's not dealt with completely in a year. Some things are better dealt with because of the knowledge that we have of what led to the issues. I also don't think we can equate per pupil expenditure for legal fees, because you might have 1 year where you don't have as much litigation as the next. I mean, it's just, it's every year is different. And the needs we have, if it's managing a litigation regarding a lawsuit or whatever, or if it's an investigation that needs to be handled by a third party. I mean, you can, that's something that you can write down and put a number to, because there's a certain amount spent on a particular year, and you've got a certain amount of students. So the math is easy, but I don't know that it reflects, I mean, to me, if we had a lot of expenditures, we have a lot of needs. And I'm not saying that we have to have 4 years, but I think we need to have more than one. And this policy allows up to 4. But I understand what you're saying, because the action we took at the last board meeting saying upon approval of this, we would have a 4-year agreement, if I remember correctly.
You remember correctly.
Pardon me?
You do remember correctly.
So now, if there's an avenue for saying, well, I hate for us to be in a point where we got to choose between 1 or 4. If this board decides we want 2, we should have an avenue to do that. Or if we want to have whatever we decide, we should be able to do that. Even if it means taking an action to change our decision to have 4. But I do think we need to have more than 1, and that's my opinion. Anytime the attorneys need to deal with some of the issues we have, and they know where we've been and what's occurred prior, it puts them in a better position. Not to mention that I think that the firm we have is the one we need to have. And it was even suggested that why not get someone local and call them when we need it? Well, I'm not in favor of that. That's like putting on your seatbelt when you see you're fixing to have a wreck. You need to be prepared in advance.
See, that's why I like, I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you have something to say, sir?
And that's why I like the idea of in-house general counsel, which is what Winston-Salem, Forsyth, Charmac, Cumberland, and Union County, who's number 6, all have. And then that's not somebody you call, that's somebody who's sitting on that first or second floor right over there, who is attending to our daily needs.
But that doesn't mean they're better prepared for it than who we've got. I don't think we can find anybody that's better prepared in educational issues than who we now have. And that's who I want to have representing us. The last thing I want to happen is to have a major issue and have someone has that much expertise on the other side of the table.
It seems that the sticking point is a 4-year issue. Would the board be willing to take a 2-year, instruct the administration to explore in-house counsel options and other avenues?
Respectfully, I think we should keep the 1 year at this juncture. With the language that's in there now, we'll have an opportunity with that second paragraph to conduct our own evaluations of the board attorney effectiveness, which will color our opinion as to whether or not we need to continue to explore the possibility of alternative counsel. And then revisit this issue at round about this time next year.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, excuse me.
I answered anyway, so it's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Brain has submitted some compelling data that shows that the trend of our current firm, who does a wonderful job, is increasing. The amount that we're spending every year is going up. 2 years ago, we talked about doing a request for proposals, and then at this time last year with COVID hitting, we decided not to do that. When he points out that we do a request that even milk, small things, we give local bidders the opportunity to send in that RFP. We've heard from, or I've heard from, well, the entire board has received a letter from someone locally in support of that. Some of our lawyers, attorneys in town that support our school system would at least like the opportunity to submit a request. When you look at the data and see the trend over the past 4 or 5 years, you see that our rate keeps going up, and other counties around us, you know that they're having some of the same problems that we are, the same lawsuits, but you don't necessarily see that same trend, and you see a lot less cost. So his data is compelling enough for me to suggest that 1 year is what we need to stay with.
Thank you.
Ms.
I've noticed Mr. Breen's accounting for what we spent the last several years. Between 17 and 18, and 18 and 19, it went down $80,000. Went back up slightly above in 19, 20, slightly above what it was in 17, 18. This year we don't know. And because we're budgeting $695,000 doesn't mean that that's what it would cost, nor we're hoping to pay that. So the trend, and I don't know anything hadn't gone up. Now speaking to even taking bids on milk, when I kind of, the attorney, board attorney is very important, and I know it is to me, and I believe it is to everybody. I also think that our board superintendent is important. We have a 4-year contract, but we don't go out and do a search at the end of it if we've had a good experience. Now, there are occasions in places, and I certainly hope it doesn't happen here, that it does happen. Contract runs out, it's not approved. You look for somebody new because you aren't approved. Now, it appears that's a similar avenue that we're going to have, hope possibly, by having an evaluation every year. If you have a good experience, one that's proper, you continue, and if you don't, then you look somewhere else for a different option. I wouldn't be upset at 2 years, but I think that I wouldn't be upset at 4 years as far as that goes, for my part. But it's the will of the board that's what will carry us. And I don't think that we're going to be better off by having in-house. We need someone that's not only got a track record with us that we've been dealing with and been successful, and we need someone that is at the top in their field. And I don't know of anyone that I can think of that, in my opinion, that can do better in school law than the attorneys we have.
Now, I will point out this. In Winston-Salem, Forsyth, Ms. Jenkins, because she has a LinkedIn, came from a firm that specialized in education law and then became their in-house general counsel. She had been practicing for several years. Nick Sojka, S-O-J-K-A, however you pronounce it. Swika had been with the firm for 20 years, handling education law matters, before he became in-house general counsel at Cumberland County. So I'm not saying go pluck somebody out of law school. I'm saying that sometimes these folks exist, that they want to take a step back from being in a firm and concentrate on one thing or one school.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not, keep in mind my limited knowledge of all the different attorneys that might be available. Still, the best of known is the one we've got, but I don't think they're the only people that can do it. I don't think they're the only ones that can be good at it, because they created their reputation and track record, and so can other people. So I'm not saying there's no one that could do it, but right now I don't know of anyone. And, but that's my opinion.
Could I point out something?
Yes, ma'am.
Just sitting here reading the policy, line 3, it says, shall be for a term of no more than 4 years. It didn't say it had to be 4 years. It said it shall be for a term of no more than 4 years. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then we're able to evaluate during that period of time the performance of the board and then make a determination. Correct?
That's correct, but the conundrum that we put ourselves in is that last meeting, we approved a contract for 4 years for Schwartz and Shaw, subject to the approval of this policy on a second read.
That's true.
What's the wording?
Yes. It says subject to the approval of this policy, so if we were to change, well, we can't change the policy to say 2 years.
No.
But I'm
The-
thinking, could I finish?
Excuse me, go ahead.
I'm thinking 2 years because I know as a board member of the this is my 3rd term, we have had litigations that's carried over from 1 year to the next. And if we just confine ourselves to 1 year, if we had something that needed to be continued, I'd feel more comfortable having someone with at least 2 years that could carry on the litigation. And I know we've had cases like that. And so that's why I thought more than 1 year, at least 2 years, not necessarily 4 years, because that is a long period of time. And that's just my opinion.
Will you keep,
Thank you, Ms. Ball.
Mr. Mercer, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Breen, as you present your data and the like, and you give the figures for Schwartz and Shaw, you say his rate, but those amounts were not his rate. Those amounts were the cost, the total cost. Now, we have had some court cases in these last 3 to 4 years of those figures that you have quoted to us. Mr. Mercer is correct, because I think initially you said he has gone up every year, where there was a year that it went down. And in those intervening years, we have had some very serious cases that required a lot of legal work. And so that impacts what the total cost is.
Are we members of the North Carolina School Board Trust?
We are.
And when we get sued,
Not the trust.
No,
Not
not
the
the trust. We're not part of
You're
the trust.
insured through an insurance company, not the school.
Yeah,
Right, we're not with the trust. I
We were for
apologize.
1
We
year.
were at one point, but we are not now.
Yeah.
but with insurance, insurance provides additional counsel for the purposes of litigation,
It does.
It depends on,
depending on whether or not it's covered.
I was just pointing out in terms of the dollar figure when you said that was his rate, but that was
Well,
not
his rate's $170 an hour. By way of comparison, again, Wake County, their monthly retainer is $3,000. Their partner rate starts at $210 and drops down from partner, associate, paralegal, staff. Each, depending on the work done by that person, they're billed accordingly. Whereas with our current contract, there is no differentiation. It's $170 per hour for the work performed.
I have an additional question, Dr. Fitch. Have we signed off on a contract with Schwartz and Schwartz for 4 years at this point?
No, we
Now,
have
if
not. No.
Ms. Barnes, if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, I have to ask you.
Yeah, I'll be there. Don't worry.
No,
To the extent
I don't think it comes down to quite as plain as we can approve the 4-year and the second reading or not, and then it's a 4-year contract or not, because we have some other options. We can step back and say, we're going to take action to say, we're not going to offer a 4-year contract. We'll offer a 2-year contract. And then we can approve this, or not approve it. I don't have a problem with 4 years being in there personally, but again, it's the will of the board, and which I'll abide by and won't whine and complain about it. But as we stand right now, talking about the legal counsel, we can step back, take action unless I'm mistaken, and say, we're going to rescind that. We're going to say, no, we're not going to give a 4-year contract upon approval of this. We can say a 2-year and approve it, put 2-year in that or not put in that. I mean, there's more options than just saying everything hinges on second reading or not second reading.
Well, then I think if that's the case, then the appropriate procedure would be to have a motion for reconsideration of the contract previously approved in the last board meeting.
Mr. Vice Chair, if we vote against the second read, then the contract that we proposed is null and void because we didn't approve it. It appears to me that we would then have to go back and do another contract with them, either for 1 year, which is our existing board policy, or do a first read on another new policy.
If you do not approve this policy on second reading, then you would go back and vote on whether or not we're going to have a 1-year contract with you all, with Schwartz and Shaw. So at that point, the contract for 4 years pending approval of this policy, you wouldn't have that. So you'd go back and take a look at it. You could go back and vote to have, you'd have a 1-year contract, or you could go back, or you could do what you were saying. It would, motion for reconsideration is more of a court animal, but for us, it's more of a motion for the board to rescind its prior action and act and take some other action.
I don't know, that's what Schwartz said we had to do the last time we reconsidered something.
They're the same
Formal motion
thing.
for reconsideration.
I mean, they're essentially the same thing. You would be reconsidering your prior action, rescinding it, if that's what you decided on, and adopting some different action.
And personally, and this is me personally, I don't like going forward and backwards and forward and backwards. I kind of like going forward, even if you go forward a little slower at the time. So passing something and rescinding it is not something I particularly like. But if that's the action we need to take, then that's the action we need to take, or that's the will of the board. But I still, I don't mind 2 years, but that's just me, and I'm just one vote.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
the data that Attorney Green gave us is very eye-opening. It is, compared to other counties, Wake County, and I thank you to Green for actually giving us this data. This is very, very interesting. I've been sitting here looking over and over it, and it is in comparison that we are, higher. But then I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm looking at our attorneys and looking at their reputation and their experience, which I think we all agree on that they all have definitely good experience and they have a reputation and they're good with what they do. There's no doubt about that. And I think the problem and the question is about the amount. Like you said, $170 per hour. So I think that's what we're all getting down to questioning about. And I don't have a problem with that because of their work ethics and work experience in the past, since I've been on the board. They've done a fantastic job. I'm willing, I'm going to get to the point, I'm willing to go along with the less than 4-year contract to do a 2-year. The 1 year, I do have a problem with that. And I know that's saying that, after 1 year, we can actually reevaluate and look at the attorneys and decide, make some different situations or make some different changes. Along with that, saying that I prefer the 2-year contract, I also would love for us to do the evaluation annually. I don't think we've done that in the past.
No.
So I think that would, yes,
Designed
because I think that would bring something to the table here if we say, well, we'll go ahead and start evaluating them each year and just have a 2-year contract. And that way, we'll have something to look at because we're all, I'm saying, well, yes, I know from just off the top of my head, they've done a great job. And when we have our closed sessions, they're giving us information that we need and giving us things to think about and making the right choices on our behalf. So I think that would actually maybe give some ease if we do an evaluation annually and just look at that. But I don't agree with the 1 year. I think that we need to do at least the 4-year. I was fine with that before because I voted on it before. But considering the conversation here at the table, I am willing to do a 2-year and then go from there. And the comment that you made, Blake, about we don't know how the makeup of the board is going to be in 2 years, made my knees shake a little bit. You saw me look at you, didn't you? It's like, you know something I don't know. But, for those of us who are coming up soon. So, but I think that the 2-year, I think I'd go along with that, preferably. That's just my opinion.
Well, and a point I'd like to make, and this doesn't necessarily support anybody's position to me, but I want to say it. It's when you're comparing the expense of one system to another, the number of students, the dollars it costs, every system does not face the same thing that the others. Now, if you look at it over a long haul, you might get a better picture. Long being a long period of time. But it's kind of like if I brag that I haven't had a speeding ticket in 10 years, it means I haven't been caught in 10 years. That doesn't necessarily make a good statistic because, somebody might have been caught 10 times and they were speeding 10 times, got caught every time. So when it comes to the expense, we don't know what other systems have faced. We don't know what they've not faced. It's interesting information to have and to know. It is. But you have to for me, while I listen to it and I process it, I temper it a bit with knowing that different, for example, every system doesn't have people, well, it might not not as many. Some people are right on top of everything that the school board does and they're anxious to sue if there's an opportunity. Some systems have more of them than others, and I don't think it has anything to do with student population necessarily. It's just people out there. And then you have occasions where you have an employee or somebody that does something that might encourage somebody to want to take action because they feel they've been shortchanged. We don't keep those people if we know who they are, hopefully, but it still happens. Now, I reckon all that's to say is I wouldn't be bothered by 2 years, and I don't think that we're in a corner where we can't do that if that's what we choose to do. It's just a matter of again, it comes back to the pleasure of the board. That's my thinking.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
We keep talking about 2 years term, 2-year terms. Are we suggesting then that you change the terminology in this policy to say 2 instead of 4? Because at last meeting, I think it was decided, pending the passing of this policy, the contract with the attorneys we have now will be a sealed deal. Does that mean that if we change this terminology to say 2 years, we would have to go back and look at the contract
Well,
again? Help me.
I would think
Yes.
we'd have to, because our policy would not allow 4 years, so therefore it would be just as, I mean, I just think on that one, you'd have to take another motion and another action of the board for that to be.
That sounds like to me the thing to do, to change the terminology from 4 years to 2 years if it's possible to do that.
After listening to the concerns and the input of the fellow board members, I would have no objection to a 2-year term, or for the language to read, for a term of no more than 2 years.
And I agree with that as well.
Well, it sounds to be a popular notion. Now, what do we do
Well,
to go in a circle to get back to that? Because
You've got a motion on the floor right now. That was discussion, so
right.
that's got to go away.
Madam,
Unless-
Unless you amend it, friendly amendment.
Madam Chair, would you
What?
accept
Mr.
the...
Ch- Mr.
Oh, no,
Chair.
she's made the motion. Dr. Fitch made the motion.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, would you accept a friendly amendment to amend lines 3 and 4 to strike out the word 4 and replace 2, and on line 4, replace the number 4 with the number 2?
Okay. It was a recommendation and the motion of the, my motion was on behalf of the committee. So I would like to get a feel from the other board before I make that friendly amendment. So, if the members of the board want to say, yes, I'll take a 2-year, then I'll be happy to make a friendly amendment. I heard Mrs. Powell say she could work with that. I'm hearing Mr. Breen say he can work with that. I'm hearing Mr. Mercer say he can work with that. I'm hearing Mrs. Barnes say she could work with that. Am I hearing anything from Mr. Boykin that he can
Mr.
work
Boykin
with
said he could work
2
with
year?
it too.
But I do like to just add this to, do like the idea of evaluating, no matter who we have, annually the board attorney, because we've not done that in the past.
Right.
And
but
that's important.
The language that we're concerned with now is this 4-year. And I've not heard from Mrs. Barnes in regard to a
This
change.
4 years,
I mean,
you
sorry,
will.
I did hear Ms. Barnes, from Mrs. Boyette in regard to, and since I've polled everybody else, I'm going to ask Mrs. Boyette, are you amenable to a change from 4-year to 2-year?
Yes, I can support 2 years, but also with what Ms. Barnes has just said about the evaluation, I do believe that is very important. I also wonder what kind of attorney, if it will worth their salt, couldn't write a contract that would say that that would make it impossible for you to prove that they weren't doing what they were supposed to so that you could break the contract. Now, I know Swartz and Shaw is wonderful, and they could certainly do that, but the point I'm making is either in the contract or in the policy, could we have something, for example, in line 11 and 12, a written evaluation will be shared with all board members and with the board attorney, something after that saying the impact of what that evaluation might be. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
I'm understanding what you're saying, that you would like, you're willing to go along with a change from 4-year to 2-year, and that you would like added to this.
A summary of the written evaluation.
Can impact the continuation of the contract. Is that what you're getting at, Mrs. Boyette?
Yes, I mean, when I read this, I see we're going to do an evaluation, we're going to share it with everybody. Well, that's well and good, but it needs to have an impact on the contract, whether it's an attorney contract or an electrical contract or whatever kind of contract. So we need to spell out up to, and like a teacher contract, or a principal contract says, you do something up to and including dismissal or breaking up. There need to be some teeth in there.
Okay, so if all of this is going into a change amendment, after a written evaluation will be shared with all board members and with the board attorney, results of the evaluation can result in termination of the contract?
May I address
Doesn't have
that?
to be that severe.
Well,
Well, that was what you said in the slide, so
I hear what you're saying, I'm just trying to be as fair as I can about it, because I completely understand that you all are stewards of public money, and I understand the discussion and appreciate the discussion, even as somebody with kids in public school myself. But let me just say a couple things. The first is, I just want to alert the board, and this is very, very much procedural. We talked a little bit about some of the amendments in the lines, but you're under your policy 2420 on adoption of policies. You can, between first reading and second reading, if on second reading you're making, amendments to the policy, the board then can makes a decision on whether they want to make those amendments in the meeting and adopt the policy there, or if those amendments are substantive enough that the board thinks that there ought to be another reading. And so I just wanted to make sure that the board knew that. We talked about taking out the one line earlier that was line 19 and then line 24 through 27 or 25 through 27, which was not a ton. But as you get into more substantive revisions, I just wanted to remind the board on what your options are as far as, okay, if we feel like we need to make some significant revisions to the policy, you have the opportunity then to postpone and have another reading because of those substantive revisions. So just alerting the board to that. As far as the contract issue, and this is just sort of advising the board as you're trying to make a good decision on this issue. If you have a policy that says you're going to do an evaluation and that the contract will be terminated if the evaluation is not favorable, certainly it's the board can decide on its policies, and that would be completely legal. Where you would run into issues, whether it was a contract I'm involved in or a contract with any other legal counsel that you might hire and have a contract with, is what the consequences of terminating that contract early would be dictated by the contract, not the board policy. Does that make sense? So you could adopt that policy that would require you to terminate a contract, and you might have a contract that, and I'm not speaking about any specific contract, but you might have a contract that has consequences for terminating that contract after 2 months when it was supposed to be a 2-year contract. Okay. So I'm just letting the board know, as you think about the policy language, it's really going to be the contract language that controls the consequences of your desire to leave a contract early.
Okay.
It was earlier I made the comment that, because I asked about, is there an implied consequence to an evaluation? That concerned me more when we were talking about 4 years, and if at the end of 1 year there was concerns, you've got, what do you do for 3 years? But with a 2-year contract, at the end of 1 year, if the evaluation is not, I would think that the consequences would be, here's what the concerns are, you've got a year to, just like we do teachers, you call a teacher in, a first-year teacher, if you see problems in them, you're going to tell them where they're coming up short, you're going to try to help them understand what they need to do to get in line, and if you're not, after another year, you discontinue their employment. And I would think that would be similar or it could be made similar in, if it's gonna be 2 years, we wouldn't be facing 3 additional years with someone that we aren't satisfied with, be it now or later. So,
Well, we could require that language in our board attorney contracts
Well,
to stipulate.
well,
that if
before
the-
we get into the contract,
I know.
I have a question in regard to, in regard to this policy.
Dr. Fitch, go ahead.
Given the discussion that we have been having, and whether or not the statement that Mrs. Boyette is asking for and a change that this board is seeming to want to move from 4 to 2, would that, and seeing that we've already made some minor changes to 2610, would what is being asked for be considered substantive changes that would need to require us to table this and bring it back? Or can we implement language change in here now and act on it? And would we have to, because the motion is already on the floor, to accept the proposal, the proposed change with the modifications that have already been made? What is our status as to how we need to proceed?
It's entirely up to the board. The language from your policy says that board members may propose amendments. An amendment does not require the policy to go through an additional reading, except as the board determines that the amendment needs further study, additional reading would be desirable. So my interpretation, which it's for the board gets to interpret its own policies, but my interpretation of that is that you wouldn't have to do another reading, but it would be for the board to determine whether or not they believe that the changes are something that you all want to sit on and take a look at for another reading, or allow, whatever input you need. In this case, if the data is fueling it, that might be something that the board wants to check into. I'm not sure. I can see many reasons why the board might be interested in postponing. You don't have to postpone, and you're absolutely within your authority to adopt this policy with amendments this evening, and whatever amendments you want.
And it's obvious that we don't have to draw the opinions out. We've been most orderly about sharing our different opinions, and this is not so different. I think we're standing right at where, if not entirely, by and large, we all agree on a 2-year contract and policy saying 2 years. And I really don't think delaying it a month would change that.
I don't think it does.
So in my opinion, I think whatever process we need to follow to have the policy say 2 years, and then, which to me means that the decision we made for a 4-year contract is not good standing anymore, and then make that decision tonight, so it'll be done. That's one opinion.
I'm getting the sense that the 2-year, and since I made the motion to begin with, is a consensus of this board. I'm also hearing a concern as to the impact of an evaluation. And so I was trying to not be as harsh as
I can take it, Dr. Fitch.
no, as harsh as you all said when I said results of the evaluation can result in the termination of the contract, and then everybody was like, ooh, ooh. So I don't know what language, but would I be in order to make the friendly amendment for a 2-year contract and with language to be determined to deal with impact of the written evaluation so that can come back to us? Or do we just leave that out, that the impact? I think everybody is hearing a concern about impact of the written evaluation.
Well, again, I'm not as concerned about it as I was when I first mentioned it. If we go to 2, just like I said, after 1 year, do an evaluation, put all the cards on the table, and if it's the concerns aren't dealt with, or you can't separate any other way at the end of the next year, and be up to 2 years, because there might be a situation where you want to hire somebody for 1 year, for whatever reason, but I don't think we ought to tie ourselves to 2 years, but up to 2 years.
Okay, I'm gonna leave my harsh language off that I had in
I mean,
terms of the result of the evaluation.
I'm just sharing my feelings about, because I was concerned about, an evaluation is just conversation if there are no consequences or anything to follow it. But, I would think that, a 2-year contract after 1 year, if it's important to the parties and you put it in writing that, you know, things aren't satisfactory and here's the reasons, then at the end of the next year, the contract's over.
All right, let me try this. As the maker of the motion, I would like to make a
Give
friendly
that a
amendment.
shot. You do right.
On behalf of the Instructional Services Committee, I move that the revision of policy 2610, Board Attorney, be approved with the language that the general contracts for legal services, including the appointment of retained counsel, Board Attorney, shall be for a term of no more than 2 years. We leave the language in beginning at lines 7 through 12 and proceed as otherwise stated.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the policy 2610 Board Attorney be approved with the change of line 3 from 4 to 2 and the numerical on line 4 to 2 years. So it reads no more than 2 years. And with the other changes of line 19 and lines 25 through 28, the changes previously mentioned, it be approved. Did I say it all?
You did, yeah.
You did good.
Okay, any further conversation or questions? Okay, please, when I call, please vote. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and it's unanimous. So, if now that that vote is taken, it means we've approved a policy that doesn't include 4 years. Is it in order for us to now
Revisit the
Revisit
contract.
the contract.
to do what?
To revisit our contract,
Yes.
yes.
Now, is that in order? Because it was not on the agenda, but it does impact that.
Well, you can amend an agenda during a meeting, so if you now need to amend an agenda, you can entertain a motion to amend the agenda to
do we
reconsider the
need-
contract.
Well,
Do
the motion at the last meeting was to approve the contract.
For 4 years pending approval of
Okay,
this
so since
policy.
we did not, since we have now
Contract's
just
not good to
changed
consider.
this to 2 years instead of
Right.
4 years, we have to look at the agenda, okay?
Now, do we need to change, do we need to amend the agenda to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's not on your agenda.
Do it. Do I hear
Do we have the ability to unilaterally alter the terms of a contract?
we're not altering the contract.
Yeah, because the
We-
contract was for 4 years.
You have the ability to amend your agenda to reconsider the 4-year contract to go to a 2-year contract that I could present.
What you could do is direct me to bring you a different contract. And then you
Please.
could, in light of your policy.
Second. Otherwise, you need to trail the breadcrumbs at this point.
Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair,
I would suggest you pack a lunch.
I move that we,
The contract would be the same, the only difference would be it would be 2 years instead of, we wouldn't make any changes, so.
I move that we approve the contract have it amended to 2 years versus the 4 that was initially.
But
No,
do we
just-
need to,
You-
Just
I think you need to
take it away and bring, Take it away.
rescind whatever action you took on our contract in the past, and I would start fresh from your April meeting and entertain a motion to approve our contract with a term of 2 years, if
But-
that's what the board would like to do.
but do we need to amend the agenda before we do
Yeah.
that?
Yes, sir, you sure do.
Okay, so we need to amend the agenda first.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move that we amend the agenda to include attorney contract renewal.
Second.
It's been moved properly second that we amend the agenda to include discussion or consideration of attorney contract. Hear any further conversation or discussion? Hearing none, please vote as a call. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
No.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye. This is 6-1. Now,
With Mr. Boykin and casting the dissenting.
yeah, with Mr. Boykin being the dissenting vote. Now, do we hear a motion regarding attorney contract?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I move that we approve the,
You need to rescind any previous board action.
I move that we rescind the previous board action that allowed for approval of board attorney contract, which was pending action on policy 2610.
I second.
It's been moved properly second that we rescind the action from previous regarding a 4-year contract with our board attorney. Now, any discussion or questions? Hearing none, please vote as I call. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That was unanimous. Now,
Motion to approve our contract for a 2-year term, if that's what you would like to do.
Subject to board attorney approval.
You couldn't stop yourself.
Could not, no. To the maximum extent allowed by law.
do we?
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we approve a 2-year contract for legal services with the attorney Schwartz and Shaw.
I second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve a 2-year contract for board attorney with Schwartz and Shaw. Hear any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, please vote as I call on you. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
No.
Mr. Breen?
No.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's 5-2 with the dissenting votes being Mr. Boykin and Mr. Breen. So now where do we go?
Letter C.
Quickly.
All right.
I'm trying to find out what.
Mr. Vice Chair, the Instructional Services Committee recommends the revision of Policy 5210, distribution and display of non-school material. Therefore, I move that that policy be approved.
A second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that revised policy 5210, distribution and display of non-school material, be approved as a second reading. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote as I call. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye. It passes unanimously.
The next action item is the Career Technical Education Local Plan, which we do on a yearly basis, and I have the pleasure of giving you some data, unless, no, I'm going to let Mr. Linden give us the highlights of this particular bit of information. If you would, please, sir. Oh, you had packed it all away. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Good evening, thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. Just want to get some highlights of our CTE.
Did you say brief highlight?
Everything up to now was an opening act for you.
Exactly. I'm good right here.
We'll just hit the highlights tonight.
Candace said brief highlight.
Definitely. So again, thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. This past year, we had 307 CTE students who were concentrators who took the work keys test. 176 of those students earned their career ready status, which is silver or above. While silver and above is considered career ready, bronze and above actually earn students a certification, an industry certification. So when we look at bronze and above, we had 272 of the 307 students that earned certifications. That's 88.6% of our students who took work keys earned an industry certification. This past year, we offered 58 different CTE courses at the high school level and 19 at the middle school level. We offer 14 of the 16 state recognized career clusters in Wilson County schools. The two that we do not offer are the education and training cluster and the government and public administration cluster. Although we do touch on the education and training one through our teacher internship program that we sponsor through our work-based learning program. In the 2020-2021 school year, we had 3,066 enrollments at the middle school level in CTE and 3,870 enrollments at the high school level. We had 92 students that participated in work-based learning placements this year, either through job shadowing, internships, or co-ops. We had 22 of our local employers to work with our students in these placements, and we've already begun lining up placements for next year for the fall of 2021. You do have in front of you the certification highlights, the number of students who earn certifications in different areas. A focus that I do want us to look at is what we're doing with STEM. We operate 4 middle school STEM labs. They're at Forest Hills, Toys Not Darden, and Springfield. So we've continued to operate and expand those offerings there as elective courses. We're also looking at investigating opportunities to place a STEM lab at our 2 remaining middle schools. Our staff there have been STEM trained and are able to implement STEM through their current curriculum, but we want to give them some more opportunities to further that STEM instruction. This past year, we received a grant in the amount of about $77,000 that was used for coding and mobile applications. As part of this grant, our middle school CTE teachers from all 6 of our middle schools and Daniels Learning Center were able to develop an updated curriculum which will allow them to combine the traditional business courses that they've been teaching with the discoveries in computer science curriculum. And the training was provided to our staff through the Friday Institute at NC State. Next year, as we're already planning for our 2021-2022 school year, we've got several items that we want to focus on. One is to purchase and implement a career exploration lab at Elm City Middle School. Another is to purchase a classroom set of tablets for our 3 traditional high schools that they can use in their mobile application development classes. Continue to provide certification opportunities for our students, expanding the opportunities in the drafting, the accounting, the agricultural mechanics, the animal science, the horticulture, marketing, foods, Microsoft, OSHA safety, Adobe, and automotive technology areas. We want to provide resources to improve literacy initiatives through our CTE curriculums. We are looking at our virtual job shadowing opportunities. Often we have students who are interested in careers that we do not have locally, so this will allow our students to participate in the virtual job shadowing and actually get that experience in areas that we may not be able to put them in face-to-face here in Wilson. Support moving to a virtualization platform to allow students to access files and programs remotely. This past year taught us that we need to be able to get to the stuff that's sitting there in our computer labs, even if we can't get students into the computer labs. So we're working on more cloud-based and server-based initiatives there. Continue to fund all of our CTE positions, which include 50.5 positions as classroom teachers, 3 positions as career development coordinators, and 1 work-based learning coordinator. And then we want to continue to fund the expenses that are required for our students to participate in their career and technical student organizations. Those are the competitions and events that our students go to. Are there any questions? Can I answer any questions for you this evening?
I thought you did great.
Thank you.
And so, members of the board and Mr. Chair, we need to approve the Career Technical Education Local Plan, which you had behind that highlighted data. And you can see the assurances that they have provided to go to the state. So I move on behalf of the Instructional Services Committee that the that the Career Technical Education Local Plan be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by the dynamic duo, Ms. Powell and Mr. Green, that the full board approved the Career Technical Education Local Plan as presented. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, please vote as called. Ms. Powell?
Aye.
Ms. Barnes?
Aye.
Ms. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Dr. Fitch?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so it carries unanimously. I think
That's it, you can turning it back over?
yes, ma'am, you're welcome to it.
That'll learn you.
That'll teach me
That'll
more.
learn you.
Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is the discussion and action items. First is a contract requiring board approval. Office of the Superintendent.
Madam Chair, board members, this is for Blackboard Inc., which is our communication system and our mobile app, as well as we're looking at that being our platform for our district and school websites. And so that's for a 5-year period, and that contract amount is $223,480.
Has this already had legal?
It is pending legal review.
Pending legal review. The chair will entertain, are there any questions? The chair will entertain a motion in regard to the request for the contract approval for the office of the superintendent.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen,
I move that we approve the contract with Blackboard from the Office of the Superintendent pending attorney review.
Second.
it has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the contract with Blackboard Incorporated for the office of the superintendent pending legal review. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Members of the board, we now have Wilson Community College Board of Trustees appointment before us. At the last meeting, we had the name of Mark Johnson, who is currently our appointee, was filling an unexpired term for 2 years, and the seat is available now. Mr. Johnson has expressed an interest in continuing to serve on the board. We also have a letter of interest from William Shreve, seeking that same appointment. Mr. Shreve has included a letter which was included with your board packet, also a resume. Mr. Johnson also had a brief resume and a letter of interest. What is your pleasure? And it is our practice that we take the information that has come to us. We always ask for a indication of interest in the board submitting the name. So we now have 2 names for consideration for this appointment. It's a 4-year term. It would be to 2025.
How many terms has Mr. Johnson served?
Mr. Johnson has been on the board for 2 years. He is filling, it's less than a full term. The full term is 4 years. He was filling the position that Mrs. Alice Freeman stepped down from, so he has been on the board for 2 years.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
on behalf of Mark M. Johnson, since he has been serving on the board for 2 years, and he definitely has sent the letter saying that he'd like to continue another term, another 4-year term until June 30th, 2025, and he has indicated that education has always been very important to him and his family. He believes he was serving on this board that inspired him to form a J5 Foundation. And the J5 Foundation gives scholarships to assist prospective students with the expense of college. So he does understand the importance of education, and his daughter actually attended Elm City Middle School and Fike High School. She also attended East Carolina University, where she received a master's in geography, and he has a son who graduated from State University and Central in graduate school, and his daughter Jasmine graduated from Duke University and Georgetown Law School. So he is very familiar with the Wilson County school system, and he lives in Wilson, and he also his job experience is Wilson County Development Service Director for Wilson County since 2007. And he's also a pastor. He served as a pastor of First Missionary Baptist Church in Elm City from March 2007 to May 2020. And he's also currently the founder and pastor of Kingdom Believers International to the present. And as far as I know, he has done a fantastic job. So I actually recommend that we continue keeping Mark M. Johnson on the board to represent us.
I see he serves currently on the Finance Committee for the Board of Trustees as
Yes.
well. Okay. All
That's
right.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Boykin?
and I want to speak for Mr. Shreve. I know him through the community. He's got a long list of community involvement within Wilson. I think he has 2 family members that currently work for Wilson County Schools, and I believe that his wife works for the community college.
Lisa?
Yeah. Yeah, I know him to be an outstanding citizen, and an entrepreneur in our community, and I think he'd be a really good candidate.
All right. We need to vote on these 2 names that have come before us. We can start with the order that they were received. First, Mr. Mark Johnson. The chair, pardon me?
No.
The chair will ask that you cast your vote, yea or nay, for Mr. Mark Johnson. Those for Mr. Johnson, pardon me? I'm gonna do the roll call. Mrs. Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Nay.
Mr. Boykin,
No.
Mr. Breen,
No.
Mr. Mercer, Dr. Fitch, aye. That is a vote of 4 to 3 for Mr. Mark Johnson. So that name will go forward to the Wilson Community College for continuation of a full term for Mr. Mark Johnson on the Board of Trustees.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I do hope that Mr. Shreve will consider having his name in nomination in the future. I taught his son, I know he and Lisa well, when I taught at New Hope, and I know he would have been a viable candidate for it, but my vote was with Johnson.
I have not met him personally, but I have met his wife and one of his daughter-in-laws, and they both are wonderful people and excellent educators. And I too would like, next opportunity, to please express an interest.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a request from the North Carolina School Boards Association, their School Boards Action Center for contribution. You received information in your board packet in regard to this request. They are an extension of the School Board Association's legislative efforts. They are asking for a $5,000 contribution, but in the past, we have given them a portion of what they have requested because of the actions that they have made on behalf of school systems throughout the state. I think our last contribution was at $2,500 as opposed to the $5,000 that they requested. What is your pleasure in regard to this request?
I think we should keep them the same. Keep it the same.
All right.
I
So
feel the same way.
is that a motion, sir?
Madam Chair, I move that we give the North Carolina School Boards Association Action Center $2,500.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we give the North Carolina School Boards Action Center a contribution of $2,500. What is your pleasure? Please record your response. Is there any discussion? Please record your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. I think we are now at a point, Mrs. Barnes, that I'd like to hear from you.
Madam Chair and Board, I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette? Aye. Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are now adjourned to closed session.